If you turn on the TV, or if you open up a newspaper, you'll inevitably find stories about the many threats to health that we are facing in the United States and around the world. Stories about diabetes and heart disease, stories about the heart-wrenching epidemic of violence that we are facing in America, and recently, stories about Zika, and these are just to name a few. Now, we've traditionally approached illness by trying to find new and better cures. More recently, we started to recognize that we have to invest more in preventing illnesses by ensuring that everyone has better nutrition and opportunities for physical activity. But there's an additional force that has the power to improve our health, a force which has largely been ignored and even misunderstood for decades, a force which science now tells us can help prevent illness, improve our health, and generally stave off illness. What is that force? Well, it turns out it's emotional well-being. Emotional well-being is a lot more than the absence of illness. It's a resource within each of us that allows us to function at the top of our game and reach ever closer to our full potential. It's a resource that allows us to be strong and resilient even in the face of adverse stress. And it's what makes the difference between surviving and thriving. Emotional well-being, it turns out, can help reduce our risk of heart disease and stroke. It's associated with improved brain function, a lower risk of addiction, and even greater longevity. For years, people have assumed that emotional well-being is something passive, that it just happens to you if you're lucky enough to find the right relationship, find the right job, or have a big enough bank account. But science tells us that emotional well-being can in fact be proactively cultivated using evidence-based tools that are surprisingly simple and accessible. For example, something as simple as walking, exercise, can have a powerful impact on our mood and on our outlook. And it can even be used to help improve symptoms of depression. And contemplative practices, like gratitude exercises and meditation, can improve emotional well-being with a relatively small investment of time. And I've actually seen the power of these tools in action. Last year, I visited Visitation Valley Middle School, one of the most troubled and underperforming schools in San Francisco. Now, some years ago, Visitation Valley decided to use meditation to help them address high suspension rates, low test scores, and disturbing levels of anxiety and trauma among their students. So much so, in fact, that they had hired a full-time grief counselor at the school. Now, they implemented a program called Quiet Time, which involved 15 minutes of meditation twice a day. Now, I traveled to the school to talk to the students, to meditate with them, and to understand the impact that this program has had on students and teachers alike. And it turns out that in the first year alone, students reported significant improvements in their anxiety and in sleep disturbances. They also had a 45% reduction in suspensions, a 30% reduction in teacher absenteeism, and better grades and test scores than they had had in years. And it turns out this program has been implemented at other schools with comparable results. During that visit, I also met an incredible young man named Tony. Tony was enrolled in a Quiet Time program at a nearby high school. And he shared with me that his childhood had been filled with violence, with discrimination, and with little support. Now, this had left him depressed and angry, which he took out on other kids in the form of bullying. But when he began meditating, he noticed something unusual. Despite always being an angry person, during his meditation, he noticed brief moments when he felt calm, and that felt good. And he began to ask himself the question, am I really an angry person? Maybe it turns out I'm a calm person. He later found the kids that he had bullied, and he apologized to them. He said, I didn't know who I was back then, but I know now, and I would never do that again. I had the privilege of seeing Tony just a few weeks ago again. It turns out he is still meditating. His father has noticed that Tony rarely gets angry now, and he's in fact doing better in school. And best of all, Tony is now helping other high school students to improve their emotional well-being through meditation. But perhaps the most important and powerful tool we have for improving emotional well-being is social connection. I learned early on when I was caring for patients that isolation, a lack of meaningful social connection, was one of the most common challenges that my patients faced. And I have seen this all across America as Surgeon General. Many people I have met have thousands of friends on Facebook, but find few people who really know them. As a society, we have built stronger Wi-Fi connections over time, but our personal connections have deteriorated. The kind of social connection that leads to emotional well-being is a deep and meaningful connection. The kind of connection that you have with friends who you trust deeply and who know who you are, with whom you can be yourself 100% of the time. It's a kind of connection that you build with people who are entirely different from you because you are able to look past labels and see them for who they really are. I'm talking about the kind of connection that inspires you to feel a kinship with people around the country and even around the world, people who you've never met, because you recognize that deep down inside, we all have the same fundamental hopes and dreams, and we're better off when we're helping each other. This is the kind of connection that not only contributes to our emotional well-being, but that also enables us to pierce through the disorienting fear from a tragic shooting, and that inspires us to line up and donate blood and to offer solace to those who are in pain. Social connection, meditation, gratitude, and exercise, these are but a few of the tools that we have that can help us improve our emotional well-being. And the more we understand about emotional well-being, the more we see that it has the power to heal our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. At a time when we are facing record levels of chronic disease and a wave of anger, cynicism, and fear in our country, at a time when the diverse bonds that hold our country together are being challenged, it's hard to escape the idea that our nation could use more healing, that we could use more emotional well-being. When our emotional well-being is high, when we have strong connections to each other, when we are resilient and when we are grounded, then we can face and overcome challenges that are seemingly insurmountable. Our diversity goes from being a source of weakness to a source of strength. We can work together to ensure that every child in America has a shot at a world-class education. We can join hands to lift millions of people from the indignity of poverty. And we can work hard to ensure that the promise of our country moves ever closer to providing opportunity and equality for all. Now just imagine how we could transform the health and outlook of the world if people had the tools to improve their emotional well-being. Imagine if we prioritized emotional well-being as much as test scores in schools. Imagine if emotional well-being was understood by our policymakers to be the fuel that enables us to be healthy, productive, and strong. And imagine if more kids like Tony, who live in some of the most traumatized and underserved neighborhoods in America, had tools that could help them develop resilience, strength, and peace. What could we build and accomplish together if this was the case? What doors of opportunity would swing open for our children? Together, we can build that world, starting with improving our own emotional well-being. And if you forget this, I'll leave you with something that I learned from the legendary Mr. Rogers. I want you to close your eyes with me for 10 seconds and think about a moment in your life when you felt deeply connected to others, a moment when you felt centered and calm, a moment when you felt grateful for the love and joy around you. I'll keep track of the time. The moments you remembered were moments of emotional well-being. Emotional well-being has the power to improve your health. It has the power to transform pessimism and anxiety into possibility and peace. It has the power to bring us together, to build a country and a world that are full of opportunity, full of compassion, and full of prosperity for everyone.